آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون. I could read something 70, 80, 100 times and I still wouldn't know it. There's pages in Surah Yusuf, Surah Hud, where I specifically remember counting over 300 times just to memorize. A lot of people ask me, this is a question I get a lot. What were your parents more happy about? When you go into Cambridge or when you finished your hifdh?
That's a good question.
That's the easiest answer. The answer is simple. It was always hifdh. They were, of course, they were happy for getting into Cambridge, but at the end of the day, it doesn't even compare. It's not even worth 1% of doing your hifdh. Since the day I started university, my dad calls me every morning to make sure, are you awake? Are you reading? Have you prayed Fajr? How much have you revised?
حفظها هذا الكتاب هتونه دفاق وسباقنا.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to episode 11 of the hifdhstatus podcast. Alhamdulillah, we're back after a 2-week break with a very, very dear guest, alhamdulillah, a close friend of mine, Ustadh Hameem, who I personally met at during my 2 years of sixth form, alhamdulillah, studying A-levels. We actually were in the same class for one of our subjects, alhamdulillah. And alhamdulillah, we brought him on today to discuss his journey with the Qur'an. As someone who actually hasn't ever travelled abroad, he's learned here in London, and as someone who not only has excelled with regards to hifdh, memorising the Qur'an, as someone who leads Taraweeh here in this community, as someone who's got a very, very strong memory, mashallah, from past experiences that I recall in sixth form, noticing that he had a very strong memory, Allahumma barik, when it came to recalling verses from the Qur'an, but also someone who's excelled academically, mashallah, someone in their first year at the University of Cambridge, studying his degree at the University of Cambridge, alhamdulillah. So we're going to get an insight into his journey, how it was becoming a Hafidh, how it is now studying at Cambridge, writing a 3,000 word essay every single week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Every single week since the academic year began, so a good 8 months now.
Yeah, around that.
Every single week there being an essay.
Every single week plus 30 books.
30 books to read for each essay.
Every single essay.
That's it. So we're going to find out, inshallah, how was he able to balance that. And for those who are like saying, I can't balance my hifdh with that one 9-to-5 job that I've got, we're about to, inshallah, disassemble that. We're about to, inshallah ta'ala, show you how you can balance, how you can excel in the Qur'an, and you can also, inshallah ta'ala, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, never forget your portion from this life, inshallah ta'ala. So without further ado, welcome to our guest, Ustadh Hameem. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm honoured to be here.
It's an honour for us to have you, subhanAllah. Jazakumullah khair for accepting the invite. You just came back from Cambridge on Friday.
Came back on Friday evening.
Alhamdulillah. Bullet train.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in London.
Okay, mashallah. How long are you back for?
I return tomorrow.
You returned back to Cambridge tomorrow?
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. Jazakallah khair for accepting then.
Yeah, no,
obviously this precious time you have in London, and now you're giving up a good amount of it for this podcast, alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah ta'ala, just obviously for those that don't know much about you, obviously you're 20 years old, you're studying at university at the moment, alhamdulillah. For those who don't know much about Ustadh Hameem, inshallah, please give us like an insight into your journey, how it was memorising, inshallah ta'ala, what you're currently doing.
Okay, so currently I'm an undergraduate at the University of Cambridge. With regards to hifdh, I started hifdh at a very young age, in primary school, near the end of primary school. And it took me quite a few years to finish. It took me well over 5 years to do hifdh. I've seen a few of the previous speakers on the podcast, and they would say they'd read a verse 10 times, 20 times, and they'd memorize it. That was not the case for me. I used to count to keep a track of how many times it would take for me to read something until I learned it. I could read something 70, 80, 100 times and I still wouldn't know it. There's pages in Surah Yusuf, Surah Hud, where I specifically remember counting over 300 times just to memorize it. So my memory wasn't as sharp in that sense. Things wouldn't go in so quickly as it does for other people. But alhamdulillah, I think it did work out. I think putting on all that time and effort, reading things 200, 300 times, it did pay off, because alhamdulillah.
Clearly you're happy now, mashallah.
Yeah, and it's also helped because the revision process was a lot easier for me. So when I've completed hifdh, there was no surah that I had to go back and fix. I don't think I had not even a single page where I thought I need to go back and fix this. It was all set, alhamdulillah. And it also meant that I could take my GCSE exams and do Taraweeh in the same month. So before every single GCSE exam, I would do Taraweeh the previous night. And the same with college, obviously COVID hit, so things got a little bit difficult then. And this year, I had 3 5-hour exams in Ramadan in the last week. So I had to travel to Cambridge a few times. And I still led Taraweeh the whole month.
Oh, you did this Ramadan?
Yeah, this Ramadan. I was still able to lead Taraweeh. And it's all because of the effort that I put in at the beginning. Reading things all those times, 300 times, 400 times. It just meant that when it came to Taraweeh, there was no need to stress about revising, fixing, do I know this verse, do I know this surah? It was just go there, stay awake and start,
MashaAllah.
So that was my journey with Hifdh. It was quite long compared to others. It was well over 5 years. I started near the end of primary school. But that was also because partly I have this sort of a perfectionist mentality. If there was one stutter, I'd get quite annoyed and I'd repeat it. My teacher, I could say 3-4 just to him. And if I made one mistake, he'd tell me, I don't think you read it enough today. So it was things like that just pushed me to try and make sure that it was always perfect. And it explains why I used to reach numbers like 300, 400.
That's amazing.
But alhamdulillah, it did pay off.
Alhamdulillah. So clearly, for those, because sometimes people, when it comes to reading a verse, they'll read it 10 times, 20 times, maybe in a rare occasion they'll read it 30 times. And if they haven't memorized that page or that verse after reading it 30 times, they have this mentality that, I'm never going to memorize. I'm just not cut out for memorizing. But here you're saying you've been repeating it sometimes.
If I'd done it 30 times, I wouldn't have finished Hifdh. I couldn't do something. If I couldn't memorize a verse by reading it 30 times, it would take me at least 100 times. I would spend at least 4 hours a day reading, repeating verses. I couldn't do it less than 100 times. It wouldn't go into my head.
Yeah.
It took me 300 times to do Surah Yusuf, Surah Hud, Surah Yunus, Surah Qasas. And you read it to the point where you start seeing it in your dreams and you start reading it in your dream. So I remember reciting Surah Furqan in my dream to my teacher a few times. And every time I'd get stuck, if I ever got stuck, my sleep went. I'd wake up straight away, and I couldn't go back to sleep until I've checked it and fixed it. I couldn't go back to sleep. So I think that partly came from reciting it so many times over and over again. It just keeps playing in your mind.
That's amazing, subhanAllah. So take us through, let's imagine we're going back to that day when you're memorizing. How would you, because obviously, what age did you specifically begin memorization at? What was the...
It was near the end of primary school, so it was quite young.
MashaAllah. Yeah. And you finished it in 5 years?
Over 5 years. It took me over 5 years.
MashaAllah. So before GCSEs came in, you had finished it, alhamdulillah?
So when yes.
MashaAllah.
So year 11 was the first Ramadan where I led the full Taraweeh.
Got it. So did you lead it in the same year that you finished memorizing?
Yeah, so I was leading before I finished because my teacher, he put a lot of emphasis on revision. So there was never a process of finishing and then coming back to fix. I never had to deal with that. It was always there from the beginning because he told me when you finish the last surah that you learn, you need to finish with all 114 together. Don't finish it with some and not other
others. Parts, yeah.
Because he told me if you finish it like that, you'll never attain a good level. So he told me you have to finish it, and when I take your last test, I want you to know every single verse. I want to be able to test you from here, and you need to be able to say it. If not, I'm not going to let you finish. So I had no choice. I had to make sure that I knew it. Otherwise, he wouldn't let me progress, learn the next part.
SubhanAllah.
He told me you have to know it all.
So take us to that moment when you finish your last surah, last page, last verse. Before that lesson that you took with him, you knew that he was going to test you afterwards.
Yeah.
Was that the case?
He would always, when I was doing my hifdh, so I can list quite a few stories. One time we were in the car driving, out of nowhere, أَلَهُمْ أَرْجُلٌ يَمْشُونَ بِهَا. And I looked at him, and he told me, go on, finish it. And I had to keep reading. And keep going until I finished the surah.
Allah.
And another time he told me, Urkisu. Where is that?
Urkisu fiha.
Yeah. So he'd give me one word. So I'd always have to be on top of it. Otherwise, he just turned around and told me, I don't think you've been reading enough.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. So you just give you sometimes one word and
he'd give a word and tell me where is it. Or if it was a word that's in multiple places, he'd say, list all the places where this word comes up. And I'll be honest, a lot of the times I didn't get it during the process. But because of all those tests, it slowly gets engraved into your head and you remember it.
Yeah, that's subhanAllah, that's someone who has a vision. He's really looking out for his student, because like you said in the beginning, you may not have got all the correct answers, but it taught you that level. You always had that level that you wanted to get to. You could just say where that verse is in the Qur'an, where that verse is in Surah, because like your teacher said, there's a lot of Huffadh who, if you give them an ayah, they won't be able to continue the ayah necessarily. They might have to go and look in it once or twice and they'll be able to read it, but he's going for that level of perfection, as you said. How did you first begin with your teacher? Take us to the moment where you first began memorizing. What was the initial spark? What caused you to start memorizing? And was there like a time where you weren't memorizing to that level of perfection, and then the moment where you were, what caused that change?
So I think the spark for Hifdh, like a lot of the people that I've spoken before, was my parents. If I speak about my dad, I'll go on all day. He was the reason why I started Hifdh, him and my mom. And the thing that made them different was they made me enjoy it. I've never been hit in my life. I've never been shouted at in my life. Not a single time. And I might not have had the richest upbringing. My dad came to this country when he was a young child. He used to work in a kitchen and he couldn't even reach the sink. He had to stand on a stool to reach the sink. Oh. So that's the state that he was in when he came to this country. So I never grew up with a wealthy upbringing. But I consider myself to be rich because what my parents gave me was a stable household. I've never witnessed a single argument in my life between my parents. I had a peaceful home, and that made me enjoy being at home. You know, sometimes people, they don't find peace at home, and their parents want them to do hifdh, but they don't create that environment. So what do these people do? They go out, they look for other people because they don't enjoy their company at home. No. And because I enjoyed it with my parents, I enjoyed doing hifdh, I enjoyed staying at home. I wouldn't want to go out and hang around with other people. I'd want to come home and be with my parents. And that's how it's always been throughout my whole life. So they made me enjoy it. And so that made it a lot easier. To this day, even though I'm at Cambridge, every single morning, since the day I started university, my dad calls me every morning to make sure, are you awake? Are you reading? Have you prayed Fajr? How much have you revised your daily portion? And that is until today. I'm 20. I've been leading Taraweeh now for a few years. I first led in year 8, only a few days. And to this day, my dad is still waking me up every single morning. And what I tell a lot of parents who ask me, I tell them my dad, if I was going to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, he would wake up at 4 o'clock just to put the heater on. Because you know me, I catch colds quite quickly.
Sniffling in the lesson.
All day at the back of the class, yeah. So he would wake up half an hour, 45 minutes before I woke up just to put the heater on, to cook something so I don't get hungry. So that's the effort that my parents put in, especially my dad. Secondly, obviously, the effort of my teacher. I can, if I speak about him, I can go on all day as well. He used to sit there and listen to 3 juz, 4 juz in one go. I remember this one day, he wasn't feeling well. And I started Surah Kahf. Read Surah Maryam. And I said to him, shall I stop? He's like, no, keep going. I read Taha. He said, okay, just get me some water. I'm like, okay, I can stop now. He's like, no, keep going. I read Surah Anbiya, Surah Hajj. And then he's like, go on. Surah Mu'minun, Surah Nur, all the way to Surah Shu'ara. I finished Surah Shu'ara. And he said to me, is that it? And midway through, he was standing up, stretching his legs because he wasn't well that day. Yet he still listened to all of that from just 16 all the way to 19. And I started 19 and read most of it. And when I finished, he told me, is that it? And that was despite him feeling unwell. So that was the effort that he put in. So I would enjoy going to the masjid. I wouldn't want to go out and hang around with anybody else. My favorite place to go was the masjid because he was there. Even now, I'm meant to be I'm a student at Cambridge, but you'll find me at the mosque here a lot of the time because he's there. So having that close relationship with him and the support of my parents was a big factor. Another thing that helped was leading Taraweeh. The first year I led Taraweeh, I was revising from Zuhr the whole day because I was nervous. And then after that, you tell yourself, I don't want to be revising all day from Zuhr. The whole day, especially on an empty stomach. So then it taught me, okay, after Ramadan, you have to sit down and make sure that it's solid. So whenever Ramadan comes, you never have to stress about leading Taraweeh. Because at the end of the day, Taraweeh, Your Qur'an shouldn't be something that causes you stress.
ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن.
Exactly. And what my teacher told me, he told me, once I asked him, which is the hardest surah in the Qur'an? He told me, if you find one surah hard, then all of them are hard. He's like, you shouldn't find any of them hard. If you can do Surah Al-Fatiha, you can do all of it. Because if you read it enough, then all of it will be at the same level, and you shouldn't find anything difficult. So I think a combination of my parents, him, and leading Taraweeh for the first year really taught me, okay, you know what, you need to put your head down. When it comes to Ramadan, you don't want to ever have to stress about leading Taraweeh. And obviously not everyone's going to lead Taraweeh. So for those who are trying to do Hifdh and don't need Taraweeh, you can still read Tahajjud at night, or you can still get in a gathering and recite with other people. And that puts that pressure on you, because you have that pressure. I have to know it. And if I don't know it, then I have to learn it. So I think that was Taraweeh was a big factor.
That's amazing. Who's your teacher? I mean, is it someone who's an native Arab, or is he?
No. So he was from Bangladesh too.
Okay, mashallah.
So I studied my Hifdh with him. So I finished my Hifdh with him first, and so he's been leading Taraweeh for over 50 years.
Wow.
He started from a young age. He used to revise. He used to revise 16 juz a day.
16.
Yeah, when he was back in Bangladesh. So,
why isn't it outside of Ramadan?
Yeah, outside of Ramadan. Yeah.
16 juz a day. That's the Quran twice. That's what Quran, sorry, once every 2 days.
Once every 2 days, yeah. So that was the level that he was used to. So he expected the same from, the same from his students. So even one mistake, one stutter, he'd tell me, I don't think you've read it enough today.
Allahu Akbar.
And his teacher used to do the same to him. He would tell him, read from here, recite from here, recite from here. And that's why he used to read it so often, because he said, well, if you ask me to read, I need to be prepared. So he done the same thing with me. And so I can't ever repay him for all of that effort. He used to sit there every single day on Saturdays. So the maktab would be from 5 to 7, Monday to Friday. I would go in on Saturdays, sometimes from Zuhr, all day. And he'd sit there and listen. And so it's because of the effort that he put in that I'm able to do the same thing now. Obviously, maybe not to the standard that he is, but still, I'm at that position where Taraweeh wasn't something that caused me, wasn't a burden to me. Or revising Hifdh, there's no surah that I feel like, if I hear it, I need to turn around and look at it. And it's because of that standard that he always expected right from the beginning. It didn't matter that I wasn't finished. Right from the beginning, he set that standard, and you have to meet it.
SubhanAllah. Did you complete an ijazah with him, or?
So after I finished with him, I completed an ijazah with another teacher.
Okay.
Yeah, so Sheikh Muhammad Shanqiti.
Allah.
So that was in Hafdh and Qalun.
See, Allah Akbar, Qalun, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's amazing.
And another thing to mention was I done Qalun during uni. So after I started at Cambridge, that's when I started Qalun, and I finished it during uni. So I know for a lot of people, I'm at uni, I don't have the time, I'm at school, college. Alhamdulillah, I was able to do it while at Cambridge and get an ijazah in Qalun right from the beginning, and the Taraweeh in Ramadan with exams. And it's not because I have a super memory. I don't have a super memory. If I had a super memory, I would have memorized things after reading it 10 times. It used to take me 200, 300 times to memorize it. So it's not that I had a special memory. It's because I put in a lot of effort. And that's what anybody who's watching needs to take away. It's about the effort that you put in. You might not have the best memory. You might not be able to read a verse once, look at it, close your eyes and know it. I've never been able to do that. I couldn't even do that now. But if you put in the effort, then you can still reach the same goal. You can reach that level that you want to reach. So I think that's something important for everyone to remember. Regardless of how strong your memory is, if you put in that effort, you will get there. Regardless of what other responsibilities you might have, work, university, college, school.
So take us through that journey of you memorizing the Qur'an. What were the ups and downs? Take us back to those memories of when you're younger memorizing. How was that experience? What was the process like?
So I think obviously the difficult part was memorizing something new. For a lot of people, I know revision was the difficult part. For me, it was memorizing it in the first place because it just wouldn't go into my head. So it would take me a few hours. I would read 2 hours before I slept. and I'd read that same part again for an hour or so in the morning, just for it to get into my head. This was excluding revision, and I would just sit there. Obviously, different people have different approaches. I've tried everything. I've tried verse by verse. I've tried few lines together. I've tried the whole page. I found that splitting it into 2-3 lines would help me, rather than reciting the whole page. That would take you a lot of time. And what someone told me once was, when we learnt Surah Al-Fatiha, or the short surahs at the back, we didn't read the whole surah and memorize it. We'd do it in little chunks. And at that point, we didn't even know how to recite Arabic. So splitting things into chunks does work. It might take a bit of time, but it will help you. In the end, you will 100% learn it. Whereas reciting something from front to back, you might not always get it. So that was the memorization of new lines, new pages. And then when it came to revision, I know I've heard from a few of the other previous speakers here that they would revise the previous 7 days or previous 10 days, however many. My teacher had a similar rule, but it wasn't 7 days. He pushed it a little bit further. He said go back 3 juz a day. 3 juz a day. So I would split my time. So I'd give, once you memorize something, you can read it with a bit of speed. So it would take me an hour. So those 3 juz would take me an hour. And wherever I was memorizing from, I'd go back 3 juz every single day. Give myself an hour. And when you read something for that many days consecutively, it engraves into your long-term memory. And you don't ever have to face that difficulty of having to rememorize it, because it's been drilled into your head every single day for around 3 months. You read that same page. Even if you only read it one time, you're reading it every single day. And that forces it into your mind. And so a combination of those two, reciting a lot when I was memorizing and reading whatever I've memorized consecutively for 3 months, it made the revision process easy. There was never really any struggle when it came to revising after anything that was before those previous 3 juz. And that's something that I recommend to people. As far back as you can go, revise every single day consecutively. So if you can go back a month would be perfect. Obviously 3 juz can be time consuming, especially if you've got other commitments. But if you can go back 1 juz a day, when you read something for a month in a row, that is in your long-term memory. And obviously we don't need scientific reasoning, but science does prove that if you read something for, I think, 25 days or 30 days in a row, if you revise something that you've memorized, it sticks in your head. So that is one thing that I strongly recommend. Try and read what you've done the previous month, not just the previous 7 days. When it comes to revising, a very common question is, so let's say you got the Mus'haf open in front of you. Do you, when it comes to revising the previous Ijazah or the previous surah that you know, do you close the Mus'haf and read and read and read? And if you come to a mistake, do you then continue going as far as you can? Or do you open the Mus'haf, check, close it? Or do you keep the Mus'haf open and look inside and revise, like just reading? I think it depends on the level that you're at. So it depends, how strong are you with this surah? If you're strong enough to read it without looking, then definitely read it without looking. If it's not strong enough to read without looking, then you've got no choice. You have to look inside and read. Ideally, the situation where you want to be in is, I can read it without looking. And when you're in that situation, then you'd open it only when you feel like you've made a mistake, or if you have even a little bit of doubt. Even if it's only 5% doubt, you should check that. And then instead of just continuing, fix it, recite it. And one thing that my teacher told me was, recite until you're fluent at reading it, where you don't have to think about it. So when we read Surah Al-Fatiha,
autopilot.
when you read Surah Al-Fatiha, if I give you any verse from Surah Al-Fatiha, you don't think about the next verse. It just comes out. And so if you can make every single page that you memorize like that, then you will never really have to struggle. It will automatically come out when you recite it. So that's the point where you know, okay, I've finished memorizing. So that's another thing to add. Whenever you memorize a new page, recite it to the point where you can read it without looking, and your mind can be thinking about other things. Obviously, you don't want to be thinking about other things when you're reciting, but the point is,
that's the level
where you don't need to think about it. You can be doing other things. You can be cooking or walking, getting on the bus, traveling, and you don't need to give 100% concentration. Yet you can still recite it confidently. And that's when you know, okay, I've memorized this, I can move on to the next part. But if you only memorize it to the point where, I can say it without mistakes, I can say it without looking, but I need 100% concentration. What about if you wake up one day and you don't feel well, or if you're tired? You won't be able to concentrate to 100%, and then you'll start making mistakes. Whereas if you, during the process of memorizing, you take it to that level where I can read this without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Then if you're ill, if you're hungry, if you're whatever, you can recite it. You'll have no issues. So I think that's the point where you know, I'm done with this page and move on. And obviously, if you stop before that, then you'll always come back to difficulties when you're revising. And ideally, you don't want any of those difficulties. So during the process of memorization, that's where you just have to drill it in and make sure and tell yourself, I'm not going to have any issues when it comes to revising this.
Yeah. When it came to revising, also, did you used to, like, if you made a mistake, how would you combat that mistake? Like, would you just look in and then look at the mistake and just repeat the ayah and then continue, or would you like underline it, repeat it a certain amount of times?
I would keep repeating it until I can say it without thinking about it, until it flows off your tongue. So say, as an example, you read something and you mixed up the waw with a fa. Then you'd keep repeating it with the waw until it automatically flows from your tongue. And that's how you know you fixed it. And if you still sometimes muddle it up, then you know you haven't read it enough times. So I think sometimes we fixate on a certain number.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be helpful fixating on a number. I mean, I've spoken a lot about numbers today, and I would do that just to keep a record of how many times it took me to learn it. But that shouldn't be the goal. It shouldn't be I'm trying to reach a certain number, a certain point. It should be take it to the point where I can read it, where it automatically flows. It's as if it's a reflex. You're not thinking about it, it just comes out, it flows off your tongue. Surah Al-Fatiha, we never think about it. Whenever we start Salah, we don't tell ourselves, okay, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, after that, Malik Yawmiddin. We never tell ourselves that. So why shouldn't everything be like that? We just need to read it to the point where it flows out. It's like a reflex, it comes out naturally. And then you know you've done it.
Yes, subhanAllah. When it came to your Hifdh journey, were there any, like, because a lot of people feel these like really low points, like dips of motivation and then peaks of motivation. What were like the low points in your journey of memorizing, and how did you kind of come out of those low points and then continue and maintain that discipline and consistency?
I think obviously there were definitely some parts where memorizing was difficult. Things wouldn't go in my head. For example, Surah, like in the Surah Yunus, those surahs. So at that point, it was hard to find motivation. So what I would do was listen. I'd listen. I'd go on YouTube, listen to whoever. It's up to you who you listen to, whoever's voice you like, really. And then that motivates you to read, because if you like their voice, you're going to keep listening to it. And if you keep listening to it, it will eventually go inside your head. So that was something that helped me in terms of motivation when things were quite difficult. I'd listen to it on the bus. I'd listen to it when I'm walking, and that would put it into my head. And you can remember where they stopped, where they started, and it would make it easier for you. And then it made that challenge, that difficult phase easy to overcome. Because you've listened to it so many times, it's in your head, you're familiar with it. You've listened to someone whose recitation you enjoy listening to, which is an added bonus, and that makes you want to listen more, and that pushes it inside your head. It's like sometimes you have to think of it like you're drilling something inside, and until it's in properly, you can't leave it. So whether that's through looking at it, repeating it, or listening to it, you have to just find whatever helps you. So for me, listening was a big factor when it came to those pages where it just wasn't going into my head. And those pages I had read 300 times, 400 times. It still wasn't in my head. I still couldn't turn around and recite it to you if you asked me to read it. So I just have to listen to it and do whatever I could to just have it inside. And eventually it does work out. If you put in the effort, eventually it will come. If I gave up, if I got to 150 and told myself, well, I've read this 150 times, it's not going in, stop, then I would never have finished. You just have to tell yourself, eventually it will go inside your head. Eventually. And that's the important lesson to remember.
That's interesting, because a lot of the guests have come on before speaking about like listening to Shaykh al-Husari, Shaykh ibn Shawi, and what you've kind of said is that like what helped you was listening to reciters that you liked, that you enjoyed listening to. If that's the case, because the reason why they would advise to listen to Husari ibn Shawi was for Tajweed purposes. If you're going to, for example, listen to a reciter that you like, maybe like a fast-paced reciter, one could say you don't pick up the Tajweed rules. how would you counter that and say perhaps like you can listen to someone you enjoy who doesn't recite as slow, as clearly as Minshawi, as Al-Husri, and still get a good level of tajweed?
So I think that's an important point. Before you start hifdh, you need to make sure your tajweed is there. So that way, if you do listen to a reciter who might read a little bit fast or might not be as accurate as someone like Husari, then you know, okay, I'm listening to them, I like their voice, I like their tune, but I still know the correct rules. Whereas if you start your hifdh without a strong foundation in tajweed, then of course you're going to fall into that trap. And in that case, you can't be listening to whoever you want. And in that case, I think that you should take a pause from hifdh and improve on your tajweed first, and then you can move on. I think that's important. If you have a strong foundation before you start, regardless of who you listen to, you'll be able to adapt. Okay, I know he's made this a little bit shorter than it should be, or this a little bit longer. I won't do that, but I'll listen to him because I like his voice. So I think that's the way to overcome that obstacle. You just need to make sure before you start you have a strong foundation. If not, then that you need to fix that before you start hifdh.
So would you advise, because some people may be currently on the hifdh journey, and they don't perhaps know all the rules of tajweed, but they're reciting to a teacher, the teacher's correcting them, the teacher might drop a few rules here and there. Would you advise someone who's on that journey to stop memorizing completely and go and learn the rules of tajweed, the theory, or to learn the theory alongside the practical element of reciting?
I would say when we say stop, it means revise what you know. Don't stop and leave it, because you don't want a mountain to climb when you come back. You stop, you revise what you know, and you learn the tajweed rules, and then you come back, definitely. Otherwise, you're just going to build yourself a bigger mountain to climb when you come back, because then you have to fix, I was reciting this verse wrong all this time. And then if you have a large amount where you have to fix, you'll feel demotivated. You won't want to do it. You probably won't even do it. And it just makes things more difficult for you. What's important is to set yourself up to make things easier later on. That's why at the beginning you need to have your tajweed there. You need to, when you're memorizing something new, make sure it's solid then. When you come to revision, there's no difficulty. That's what's important. Laying a strong foundation. That is the most crucial.
That's so true. SubhanAllah. That is, I do know of people that in my own circle who have memorized a huge or significant portion of the Qur'an, and then later on they discover that tajweed isn't there. And so when they go back to reading what they read before, what they're familiar with, it's almost like they're memorizing a new ayah, because now the tajweed rules are coming in. So like you said, you're just giving yourself a bigger mountain to climb.
And the thing is, once you've memorized something, it flows out of your mouth.
Exactly.
And if you memorized it incorrectly, that's even harder to fix than memorizing something which is new.
Exactly.
So it's important to try and, before you start hifdh, make sure your tajweed is there. Before you even get to that period where I've finished hifdh and I have to revise, make sure that you've memorized it to a good standard. And then you'll face no issues, no difficulties.
When it comes to learning tajweed, would you recommend, are there any first of all, how did you go about learning the rules of tajweed? And second of all, is there anything you'd recommend perhaps in hindsight, or things that you used learning perhaps Hafdh al-Atfal, Jazariya, or did you go about it a different route, perhaps with your teacher? How did you go about it?
So most of it was by my teacher.
Okay.
At the beginning. So he taught me all the tajweed rules that I needed to know. And then obviously after I finished hifdh with him, then you realize how much you don't know.
Yes.
Then you learn, okay, so I'm reading hafs. I'm reading the way of Shatibiyyah. So that means my munfasil can only be 4. It can't be 2. If I do it with 2, then I can recite without sakt.
No, exactly.
So you learn all of this stuff after. I think at the beginning you need to know the basic foundational rules. So a book like Tuhfat al-Atfal is a good start. Jazariya, again, these are good books to start off with. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which book you're using, as long as the book covers all of the necessary rules. And then you can branch out and learn, okay, I'm reciting Hafs and Asim. How am I reading it? There's different ways of reciting it, the different rules. And that can come after. You can have started your Hifdh before that point.
In regards to, again, go back to, like you said, when you started your memorization, when you finished it, your GCSEs, the academic sort of side of things as well. Did you go to an Islamic school, or were you going to like a mainstream school? How was that?
So my whole life has been going to normal. I went to a normal primary school, normal secondary school, college.
Public school, just...
Yeah, it's always been public school. I never had any private teaching. I never went to an Islamic school. So it was always balancing both hifdh with the normal school curriculum.
That's amazing, subhanAllah, because a lot of times some people think, you know, these Huffadh that come on the podcast, all of them have gone to Islamic school, all of them have, that's not the case.
It's not the case at all.
That's not the case.
And you can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm using my example, but I know of other people as well. I know people now at university who have done hifdh, and they're still at a top university, having spent their youth with the Qur'an. So it doesn't mean that you have to pick one or the other. You can do both. I think sometimes as parents encourage their kids, pick one. You do one and I'll support you. I don't want you to do both because it will be too difficult to do both. Sometimes kids, as an excuse, and obviously kids are kids, they want to have fun, they want to relax. Out of laziness, they'll say, how can I go to school? I have homework. I mean, at the end of the day, secondary school homework, primary school homework. I don't even remember getting homework in primary school. I don't remember doing it in secondary school. I probably shouldn't be saying that. But it's not that it's not that time consuming that you can't do your hifdh. Even at college, you can still find a way to give yourself the hours in the day to memorize. You can make those hours if you have the intention. I'm going to make sure that I do it. You would do it. I'd say now that I'm at university, I probably read more than I had done before, and in theory, I should probably be more busy now at Cambridge now than I've been ever before. But I think I spend more time now revising hifdh than I did in secondary school or college.
So how do you currently find that dedication, consistency? Like you said, you're still, mashallah, reading it. And if you, even when you think back to your days at public school, how did you continue, how did you maintain that discipline and consistency to stay with the teacher? Because like you said, your teacher had, mashallah, Allahumma barak, he had high expectations. How did you find that balance in your routine, in your daily routine, and consistency, and keep yourself disciplined? Was there something you told yourself? Was there something your parents said to you, your teacher said to you, a hadith you heard that kept you on that path? And because at the end of the day, it's your choice. You could have chose, you know what, I'm going to leave hifdh, it's too much, I'm just going to stick with public school. What kept you going?
I think once you put in all of that effort, when you put in a lot of time and effort, you don't want it to ever go to waste. And my parents would always remind me, look, you put in all of these hours, why would you let it go to waste? If that was the case, then it would have been better for you not to have done it.
Yes.
Because if you're memorizing to forget, then you're just wasting your time. So my parents constantly reminding me, to this day, I've already mentioned, my dad wakes me up every single morning at 4 o'clock. Even though I'm at Cambridge, even though I'm grown, I'm living away from home, he still calls me as he did when I was 7 years old. And now I'm 20 and he's still doing it. So over 10 years, my dad has been putting in a shift to make sure that I'm always revising, that I never, not even leave a single day. Even when I had the interviews at Cambridge, on those same mornings, I woke up, what was the first thing I had to do? And it wasn't out of force. My dad made me enjoy it. I wanted to do it. He's waking me up. I'd tell him, wake me up at this time. It was never forced upon me. He made me enjoy it. So even the day I had the exams for the Cambridge entrance exams, or the interviews, or even when I had 5-hour exams last month, I would still wake up early. He'd still wake me up, revise. Maybe you might not be able to do as much as you would do on a normal day, but you still have to do something. You can't segregate it. You can't completely push it to the side.
Did you say he wakes you up at 4 a.m?
Yeah, to this day.
Allahu Akbar.
To this day. And if I oversleep, I'll wake up to 20 missed calls.
Wow.
He'd keep calling until I answer.
SubhanAllah.
That's the effort that he puts in. Even though he could have just gone back to sleep, he'll keep ringing until I've woken up.
SubhanAllah.
So that's the effort that he puts in, even until today.
Allahu Akbar.
That's the effort that my dad puts in.
SubhanAllah. I mean, it's amazing. It's these type of parents, SubhanAllah, you can see how they get the Qur'an on Yawm al-Qiyamah. They were involved in the process, you know. It wasn't like, you know, you have a lot of, even when you teach at some of the madaris and some of these madrasas, like you would teach a child and you would never ever see the parent. You know, like the parent just sees it as almost like a form of babysitting, you know, stick him in an institute and then go off and have some free time. But really and truly, those parents or those children that succeeded, Allahumma barik, like yourself, mashallah, your parents were, and not to say obviously those who are all Huffadh had their parents involved, But the parents who really understand the weight of it, like the crown and everything on Yawm al-Qiyamah, brighter than the sun, they want to be involved.
Yeah.
They want to be part of it. Yeah. How did your parents go about making you love the Qur'an as opposed to perhaps like constantly being on your case in a way that made you hate it? So how did they do that?
So what I've seen is this: the students whose parents don't have an attachment to the Quran. If they don't read, I've heard students turn around and say, "Why shall I read? You don't even read." I've heard kids turn around and say that to their parents. And growing up, I'd always see my parents reciting the Quran themselves, so it made me want to do it. And as I said, how my teacher would pick out random spots.
Yeah.
My parents would do the same thing. They'd tell me, "Can you read from here? Can you read from this? Can you read from that?"
Yeah.
And it just meant that I had to know it. And it wasn't that if I don't know it, I'm gonna get shouted at or I'm gonna get in trouble. That was never the case. I just didn't want to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And it made me realize now I realize how important that was, because now they don't chase me. If I ask my dad, "Can you test me?" he'll be like, "You just read it." He doesn't chase me up anymore. When I ask my teacher before Ramadan, I'm like, "Do you want me to read it to you once?" He's like, "Nah."
That's amazing.
But now they don't ask. Yeah. Now if I ask them, they say, "No, you just do it yourself."
Oh, okay.
But there was a time where they would always be on my case, and they were looking out for me because they had no other reason to. It wasn't about money. I didn't give them money. My teacher, he taught me for free.
SubhanAllah.
I didn't pay him a single penny, and he gave me all those hours every single day. So it's because of their effort and their encouragement, definitely.
SubhanAllah. What would your advice be to parents who are watching this podcast? The amount of parents who have contacted, both through the comment section, both on the platforms that we have on hifdhstatus, amount of parents, subhanAllah, have contacted, it's overwhelming. And we've had amazing comments like, "Inshallah, my son can also be on a podcast in the future." It's amazing, subhanAllah. But what would your advice be to parents of aspiring Huffadh?
Okay, so we've spoken about the importance of retaining your hifdh after. A lot of the previous speakers have touched on this point. Yeah. Retaining hifdh is an important part. But I think we need to take this further. Okay. Because Islam is the fastest growing religion in the country. But the statistics show that there's also a lot of people leaving the religion. There's also a lot of people leaving Islam. And this doesn't just affect the people that aren't doing hifdh. It affects the people that are doing hifdh as well. We can't assume that there are people doing hifdh. They're fine. They're safe from that. I've heard of cases where people have done hifdh and they've left Islam. Allah. So the first thing that parents need to do is teach their children what Islam is. Obviously, in the society that we are growing up in, the younger generation is taught to question. They question everything. They question authority. They question parents. They question the people older than them. They question religion. And sometimes curiosity isn't a bad thing. Curiosity isn't bad, but we need to be able to give them the proper answers. Yes. And the reason for this is important. If they hold on to Islam, then they'll hold on to their hifdh. And if they don't hold on to their religion properly, then they'll never hold on to their hifdh. So the first question to begin with, parents, sometimes they don't explain to their kids, why are you doing hifdh? I've heard some parents say, "Oh, you need to become an imam, you need to recite in front of people." This isn't the correct encouragement. Obviously, you can say that. It might encourage the child, but you need to make them understand exactly the most important reason why they're doing hifdh. Eventually, incentives like sweets or toys after completing a certain amount, they won't work as a form of encouragement. They need to know that they are learning this book for Allah, and they need to understand who Allah is if they want to truly feel motivated to read. So what do they need to know about Allah? They need to know that their existence depends on Allah. Obviously, you go to school these days, the values that they teach contradict this. So parents need to actively engage at home and teach them, look, there is a Allah, there is a creator, and because of him you are here. There are people that have 2 eyes, they can't see. They have ears, they can't hear. They have legs, they can't walk. They have brains but no intellect. We don't decide every breath that we take now. We're not thinking about it. And one day, regardless of, we can have, there will be loads of people in the room. You can have 100 people in the room. You can have the best doctors in the world. If your breath is going to stop, it's going to stop. So that's what a child needs to do first. Parents need to explain to their child, look, there is an Allah, you have a creator. After they realize that Allah is their creator, we need to explain to them, okay, now we're going to teach you what Islam is. Okay? Because if they don't know what Islam is, Islam So the word deen is often translated to English as religion. The word religion, our understanding of the word religion is heavily influenced by the Western world, our definition, and we don't realize it. What comes to our head when we think of religion? We think
rules,
we think scripture, holy books, we think places of worship, rituals. That's what we think is meant by religion. But this definition is a very Western idea of religion, and it's a concept where they separate religion from the rest of your life. Religion has its own sphere. You have that at the masjid, and it's separate. And this isn't what Islam is. I won't go too deep into the history of all of this.
We know you can. We know you can.
Of secularization.
3,000 word essays.
But this decision to distinguish religion from every other sphere of life was used as a pretense to colonize, and it was because they tried to show that secularization and no religion was superior to having religion. But this occurred in a Christian context. What we need to remember is we're not Christian. Because secularization has emerged in the Western world, not in the Muslim world. And it's because they have issues that we don't have. So this is the first step, and I'll go into what those issues are. I'll mention that a little bit later.
Sure.
So the first thing is, now that the children know there is a Allah, you are created, we need to explain to them correctly what is religion, because it's more than just what you do at the masjid. It's an entire way of life, and that's what they need to understand. And the reason why I say this is because we see this come exam season. How many people don't fast? How many people miss salah? And in the case of people doing hifdh, which is the main people we're looking at here, they completely stop revision. They're like, I've got my exams, I've got GCSEs, I've got A-levels, I will read after.
Yes, very common.
And if a child understands, look, Islam isn't just something separated into one part of my life. It's always there, it's always existing. Then they'll never sever that attachment. Whether it's exam season, whether they have a job, they'll always keep that connection, and they will always be in constant revision. And that is when they won't forget their hifdh. We need to make sure, so to summarize, we need to make sure that first they know who Allah is, because they'll want to do it for Allah, they'll stick with it. Then they need to understand that our religion isn't just something where you put into the private sphere. It's always there. So just because you have exams, it doesn't mean you put hifdh to the side. And that's what my teacher told me. Loads of people told me. The amount of people that told me when I started GCSEs, you can't do that. You can't do it with Taraweeh. He told me you can. I said, okay, I'll do it. I done it. Then I went to college. It was with A-levels. Obviously, COVID came in the end. And then I was at uni this year at Cambridge. And they told me I have 5-hour exams. I've never done something like that in my life, a 5-hour exam. That's a whole school day, 9 a.m. in the morning. And this was during Taraweeh. And he told me, do it. You can do it. And so did my parents. And then they're always thinking the best for me. And sometimes parents think the best is to separate.
Of course,
This is your exam season. This is once in a lifetime. And loads of people say you have Ramadan for the rest of your life. You have Taraweeh for the rest of your life. You can do that later. That is something that we need to remove. We need to say, look, you can do both, because Islam, your hifdh isn't part-time. Hifdh isn't part-time. Hifdh is full-time.
No.
And it's not by full-time, I don't mean 24 hours a day. I mean every single day. It doesn't need to be 24 hours a day, but you can't put it to the side. Okay, I've got exams now. I'm not going to do it. So this is the first thing that parents need to do. But obviously, this is the foundation. Regardless of whether you put in that foundation into your children or not, it doesn't mean that the challenges around them disappear. So how do you respond to the challenges that will come with you? Obviously, as I've already mentioned, secularism, atheism was able to emerge only in the Christian context. It didn't,
with that detachment of the religion and
and it's because their theology allowed it to. I'm not going to go into that. There's no need to go into all of that. But it doesn't apply to Muslims. I'll give a few examples. The first example which is particularly relevant today, is the values that they're taught at school. Children are taught, follow your desires. Anything which prevents you from following your desires is a bad thing. So when a child is taught, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. Islam says you can't do this, or your parents say you can't do this. They see it as a barrier. They see it as a barrier to their happiness. They think that, this religion doesn't give me freedom, it doesn't give me liberty.
It's a burden on my...
Yeah. But this is a misunderstanding. They think that because Islam has forbidden something, it means that the religion says that there's something wrong with you. If Islam says, look, you can't do this, I want this, but I can't do it, this religion is saying that there's something bad about me. And then you hear a lot of people say, well, I left the religion. If the religion is telling me there's something wrong with me as a person, then why should I be part of that religion? And there's loads of issues. I don't need to go into all of them. Whoever's watching, parents who understand what these values are. And children think, okay, well, if this religion is telling me there's something wrong with me for that, then I'm going to leave it. But this isn't the case. The purpose of Islam, what is the purpose of Islam? Is to submit to Allah despite our desires. So we don't drink alcohol, we don't have pork, because we are commanded to. I wouldn't know, we wouldn't know. Maybe there's enjoyment in consuming them. But we don't, because the purpose of Islam is to submit against your desires. You're not meant to do what you want. And this is what children need to understand. And parents need to, not just children, all of us. When we realize that, we won't see it as a burden. The whole point of the religion is for us to do what Allah wants, not what we want. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. If you take your own whims as your God, then that's not freedom. That's just you being a slave to yourself. So what parents need to remember is, when children come to them saying they want this, they desire that, they need to explain that Islam forbidding it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. The point is that we are meant to follow what Allah says. And that when children understand this, or when we all understand this, then we won't see Islam as a burden, and we'll want to do our hifdh. Because if you keep that attachment strong, I'm not going to separate religion because it doesn't fit with what I want to do now, then you'll never be able to do hifdh, because you're going to pick and choose. You're going to pick and choose. I don't want to do it today because I want to do this today, and I want to do it now because it's okay with me now. So once they recognize, okay, look, the purpose of submitting to Allah above your own whims doesn't mean Islam is a bad thing for you. This is the whole purpose of Islam. Then we'll see, if when children understand that, they won't turn away from the religion. And the reason I'm giving a lot of attention to this, I know it's not exactly practical tips for hifdh, but I remember reading a statistic. I think it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 children in the West leave Islam. That is a big number. That's huge. In a class of 30 kids, 5 of them will leave Islam. That's a huge number. And none of us want that. Whether our children are doing hifdh or not, we don't want them to leave Islam. But obviously, if you don't have a strong foundation of Islam, it doesn't matter how much you push them to do hifdh. They're not gonna continue it. They're gonna give up. So obviously, I mentioned some of the issues that I've mentioned a couple of times. Christians have had issues. So I'll mention it just in case people are want to know the answer out of curiosity. So I'll keep it quite brief. So Christian belief was under attack from things like science, Darwinism, claims against mistakes in the Bible. So and things like wars, because the churches, they actually supported wars, despite them saying after we didn't support them, they actually did support wars. So things like science, as an example, according to the Bible, the earth can only be 6,000 years old. The Qur'an, how old does it say the earth is? It doesn't. It doesn't give you an answer. It doesn't say the earth is this old. So we don't have that type of issue. And another thing, science is one of the reasons cited by lots of deconverts, people that leave Islam. They cite science as their religion, but we simply don't have those issues as that Christianity does. Christianity or Judaism, in fact, as well. According to them, the earth can only be 6,000 years old. We don't have that sort of specification in the Quran. Another point is, and this is an important one, because you hear this a lot on the news, things like wars and suffering. And for the Christian, this was a big problem, because their belief about God means that and obviously I'm no expert in this, and I won't go into it too deeply, but their beliefs about God has contradictions, because how can God allow all of that suffering to take place? For a Muslim, it's different. We don't have that sort of belief. Why? Because what we believe, and all Sunni schools of theology, whichever, I'm sure from the viewers, there's different people that might have slightly different views, but overall, every Sunni school of Islamic theology will agree that we can't put our own standards, we can't apply our own standards to Allah, Who said that suffering? Who said that makes Allah bad? We can't turn around and say, oh, Allah is doing something bad. We can't, because who are we to decide that something like causing someone else pain is bad? We can't decide that. You can't. If you ask somebody, use science to explain why murder is bad, can they? They can't. You can't use science. You can't use your intellect, because your intellect, your rationality is shaped by the society that you were brought up in. So if you're brought up in a society where it's fine to hit other people, to swear at other people, you think it's fine. And if you're brought up in a society where it's not fine, then you'll say it's not allowed. So who are we to decide what the standards to judge Allah is by? We can't. So that's what we need to. That's what we need to explain to children. And I won't go on about this topic. The point is that Islam is different to other religions. But we need to make that distinction clear, because again, there's loads of Muslims that say, why does Allah allow us to suffer? If He's all powerful, if it's within His power to prevent it, if it's within His, if He has all this care, if He has all this mercy, then why does He allow it? And there are examples of Huffadh which I've heard that they've finished their hifdh, they've even led Taraweeh, and they've left because they didn't have a proper understanding. And the reason is because they've been influenced by Christian ideas, because we're in a Western country, but we simply don't have those issues. So if we can address these topics for ourselves and for the youth, then we won't see people leaving Islam. We'll see a strong attachment to Islam. And if there's a strong attachment to the religion, then there's a strong attachment to your hifdh. You're not going to let it go. So that's why I know it sounds like I've spoken about something that isn't directly related to hifdh, but fundamentally this is more important, because whether you do hifdh or not, you still need to be a Muslim. And to be a Muslim, you need a strong foundation. You need to understand that our religion encompasses everything. Our religion teaches us to submit against our desires to Allah. So just because we want something, it doesn't mean that the religion is saying there's something necessarily bad with us. It just means that we need to not follow that desire. That's what the point of the religion is. And we need to remember that we live in a country that used to be Christian. Now it's not. Now it's secular. We live in Europe. We live in a Western society. We simply don't have the same issues that they have. The list goes on. I could go on. Obviously, for purposes of time, I won't. But we simply don't have the same issues that they do. So why should we allow their issues affect our faith? We shouldn't. And once we have that strong grounding, when children are brought up with a strong grounding, they'll never let go of their hifdh, because then they'll feel encouraged. I'm doing this for Allah. I'm doing this because I will see the benefits of this later on, and they're not going to leave it. So I think that's important for parents before you get to the hifdh, hifdh, practical steps for hifdh. And then obviously it's things like waking them up in the morning, showing them a good example, giving them peace at home. I know some parents, they want their children to do hifdh, but they don't give them a stable lifestyle at home. It's chaotic. It's chaos at home. Now, what child is going to feel motivated in a situation like that? They simply won't. So as part of the parents' job, it's not just, I'm going to pay for their classes. That is less than 1% of the job. You have to give them peace at home. They have to enjoy it. You can't force it into them. You can't hit them. You can't shout at them. There are obviously instances where you can tell your child off. But that can't be their reason for doing hifdh, because my dad's going to shout at me. Because what happens one day, that your dad's going to stop shouting at you.
No, he's not going to be there.
He might not be there. Or you might move out. Whatever happens, your dad won't be there to shout at you. So then what will happen? They'll let go of it. So parents need to instill that love for hifdh in their children. They need to enjoy it. So after giving them a strong grounding of their religion, they need to make them enjoy hifdh. That's the second step. And then it's things like helping them by waking them up in the morning, because at the end of the day, if you have a young child 10 years old, are they really going to wake up in the morning at 5 a.m, 6 a.m, out of their own choice? That's what parents need to do. And they need to ask them, how much have you done? Don't shout at them if they say, look, I haven't been able to do this page today. Okay, fine, we'll try, we'll go again tomorrow. But as long as you're showing them, look, I'm keeping an eye on you, I'm asking you every single day, how much have you done? Then they'll keep with it. But if you ask them for the purpose of having a go at them later, then they're gonna turn around and not care.
So it's a mixture of keeping them accountable with understanding of why they're doing it.
And that is key. And once the child understands, and you keep them in check, you have nothing to worry about. That child will complete their hifdh.
That was a very That's a very amazing answer, actually, because it's not narrowed down to specifically hifdh. We have to tackle it from the holistic approach, like you said, societal.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, hifdh is one part of being a Muslim. You can be a Muslim and you don't need to do hifdh. Not everyone has to do
the highest ranks of Jannah without being a hafidh.
Exactly. So the fundamental issues is making sure that children stay in Islam.
Exactly.
Because there are Huffadh that leave the religion. And obviously, I think the reason why I'm speaking about this is because obviously I grew up in Tower Hamlets. It wasn't something that I saw. But in my few months of being away at Cambridge, and obviously at an institution like that, you can imagine.
Of course.
And that's when that's when I realized, look, parents need to, before you put hifdh into your kid, put the religion into your kid.
Identity, a Muslim identity.
They need to, that's exactly what it is. A Muslim identity. We are different.
Yeah.
And it's not bad that we're different.
Yeah.
We're different, and we're not ashamed to say
it. It's a izzah.
Exactly.
That you're a abd of Allah.
Yeah.
You're a servant
and you should
of
feel
Allah.
honored.
Of course.
So that's the first step. When you have a Muslim identity, then they'll be encouraged. Even if you don't tell them to do hifdh, they'll do it themselves. Now I'm sure if your parents or my parents didn't tell us revise today, we're gonna wake up and we're still gonna do it.
Yeah.
You don't need them to tell you because it's part of your identity. I also think that hifdh was something that I was thinking about this. I think about this often. If I didn't have hifdh, I don't know what I would have. I'd just be going to uni and I would lose that sort of purpose. Yeah. Whereas when you have that attachment to the Quran, you don't need to have memorized all of it. But if you keep that attachment, then you'll never have those thoughts of depression or sadness. Because at the end of the day, when you just go to uni or you just work, those things are important. But without the attachment to Islam, you'll never find true happiness. And by that I don't mean, I'm not trying to encourage people or discourage people from going out there, working, studying and living. That is just as important. That is just as important. وآخرون يضربون في الأرض يبتغون من فضل الله وآخرون يقاتلون في سبيل الله. There's two groups of people that Allah mentions in Surah Muzammil. The first group of people are the people that go out there and earn a living. They go out there and earn a living. And the second group of people are the people that يقاتلون في سبيل الله. They die in the path of Allah. They fight in the path of Allah. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he said, and obviously there's some questions over the narration, but the point is important. He said it would be more beloved to me to be from the first group because Allah mentioned them first in the verse. The people that go out there and earn a living. And all the prophets, they all had their own occupation. So by this I don't mean, I'm not trying to deter people from getting an education or getting a good job. Those things are important, but they're important as long as you remember what is fundamentally the most important issue, and that is your religion. And you mentioned the verse وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا. Don't
forget your portion of this life.
Don't forget your portion of this life. Some of the scholars say that portion is the cloth that you'll be buried in when you pass away. Because at the end of the day, what are we taking with us from this world except for that cloth when you pass away? You can get the best degree in the best uni in the world. You can earn the most money. You can have the nicest houses. You're not taking any of that with you. But of course, it's important to make sure that you earn, you get a good job, you study hard, so you can help those around you, can help your family. But that doesn't mean you completely relegate Islam, or it doesn't mean that you completely relegate your responsibilities just because I'm going to do hifdh. You need to make sure you have both. I say this because I've heard people refer to the verse رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. And then they think, in this dua you're asking for Allah for the good in this world and for the good in the next. And sometimes people have the wrong understanding of what it means by the good in this world. They think, it's about having money and cars. It's fine, because then we ask for وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. But that good in this world, some of the scholars have narrowed it down to things. So it's things like, I can't remember from the top of my head, but it's not about having money. It's about doing good with
almost like a rizq, like the barakah as well.
As in, it's like, so by good in this world will mean things like having your attachment to your parents, have good conduct with the people around you. This stuff will benefit you in the akhirah. It doesn't mean just focusing on making money and
It's not restricted to that.
It's not restricted to that. And so there's that balance, or as a better way of putting it, imbalance. You need to remember that the akhirah is worth more than the current, than where you're at now. So just because you're getting a good degree from a good uni, it doesn't mean that it's everything.
Exactly. There's a poem for subhanAllah, I forgot the Arabic, but I read this poem, and subhanAllah, it was so deep. They put it in a way, you're striving hard in terms of the affairs of the dunya. You're going full on, and you don't realise the garment they're going to wrap you in to place you in a coffin has already hit the market.
Yep.
And it's subhanAllah, like sometimes you can get, you're on that, you've got this goal, you're heading to it, you're saying 2 years from now I'm going to be here. Little do you know, this thing's going to be bought 2 days from now to be wrapped around yourself. And it puts it into perspective, because it gives that tastelessness almost to the dunya, in the sense of, like you said, there is no balance. You're not balancing this dunya with the akhirah. The akhirah, there is no, if you're doing that, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
If you're doing that, the akhirah has to be your priority. Kunu abna al-akhirah, be children of the next hereafter.
Because we're only here for a few decades, but some of us have lived half of our lives already. We don't know, maybe less, maybe more. What's important is that whatever we do, we have in mind what's coming, what's more important. And so obviously hifdh is something that will benefit us then. But to get to the position of a hafidh, you need to remember that you need to have that understanding first. You can't become a hafidh because your parents said, I'm going to buy you this if you finish, or your parents said, people are going to call you imam at the masjid, and yet they're going to buy you stuff and they're going to give you respect. First, you need to understand what the religion is. When you understand what the religion is, then you do hifdh with the correct intention. And if you do it with the correct intention, you'll finish it and you'll stick with it. At the end of the day, people's respect and the respect people give for you achieving something will only last for a certain amount. As an example, if you tell someone you're a hafidh, they'll be happy. After 2 minutes, are they speaking about it? Probably not. If you tell someone you're at a good uni, you've got a good job, they're like, wow. 30 seconds later, they're not thinking about it. So if your intention to do hifdh is to impress other people, then eventually when you realize that these people don't care anymore because they're busy with their own lives, you give up, you leave it. But if you have the correct intention, then you'll never let it go. You don't care if there can be nobody in the world who knows that you're a hafidh, but you still hold on to it because you had the correct intention. And to have that correct intention, you need to, parents, and from a young age, you need to grow up with a strong foundation of Islam. You need to know, okay, this is the religion, and it means more than this world. And that only then will you do hifdh with the correct intention, and you stick with it regardless of any difficulties that comes your way, regardless of what other responsibilities come. You make yourself do it.
What you said in answer to that question about the advice of the parents, essentially you can almost, if you summarize the answer, it's for the parents, for the Muslim parents, to understand and be educated about their deen, to understand their deen. That's what it comes down to. If you don't know how to answer certain, because like you said, children will ask questions. Children will inquire, why am I learning the Qur'an? Why am I studying the Qur'an? Why am I memorizing? If the parent doesn't know, it's a recipe for disaster. You need to understand your deen. You need to, just because you're a parent doesn't mean you stop seeking the religious knowledge, Islamic knowledge.
Exactly.
And to make sure that the child understands that your life and your death is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like your whole life, Islam is a way of life. Not restricted to a certain location. Like you said, we have many of the religions that are restricted to the church. You go there once a week on a Sunday. After that, you do what you want because someone died for you and all your sins.
Exactly.
Other than that, you're basically saying the door's open, do what you want. But Islam isn't like that. Islam is Islam, submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do what He has ordered you to do. You stay away from what He has prohibited you or told you not to do. And that's a manner we took as human beings.
And I think that's very important, especially because of what I've seen the past few months. I think it's imperative for parents, before they even consider hifdh, you need to lay the foundations there. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much you make them read, which madrasa you send them to. It won't make a difference because if they don't know why they are there, they will leave. And people are turning away from Islam. We don't see it. We live in East London. It's not as
bit
common.
of a bubble, yeah. And
when you go outside, and when you especially go to these institutions where they're very dominated by secular ideologies. It's not. I don't just mean just go out of London and walk around on any street. When you go to those institutions or those companies, work for a company, when you're surrounded by those sorts of values, that's when you can see the people that didn't really get that understanding put into them, because they don't understand. They agree with some of the criticisms that they make. Again, I don't want to drift too far off, because this is a podcast about hifdh. An example would be the treatment of women. So there are Muslims that agree with the non-Muslims' portrayal. What the media portray, they agree with it because they simply don't know. And of course, if you haven't been educated about it, you'll take the only opinion that you hear. And then what do? They leave Islam. They say, look, I get treated better off outside. And they leave. And they agree with the media's portrayal when it's simply incorrect. Obviously, the sources that they're taking their information from, they have their own reasons behind doing so. They have their own reasons. They want control of you. They want you to submit to them, submit to humans, submit to desires, rather than submitting to Allah. Because why? Because they know if you submit to Allah, then it doesn't matter what they do to you. They'll never have you under their control. But if you don't submit to Allah, then you submit to them. And then they can get you to do what they want.
Like the verse from Surah Al-Fatiha, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. Do you see the one who's taken his desires as his Lord? And that's what it is. If you don't take Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord, even if you give yourself the title of an atheist or an agnostic, you are, willingly or unwillingly, you're worshipping something. That's the default. The human has to worship something. Whether that's your job, whether that's your boss, whether that's your corporation, your company, you're going to be worshipping something. So the Muslim, he understands that through his submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes everything else that other people are worshipping the Muslim sees it as something temporary, and they can still take advantage of that thing. They can still be in that, like you said, they can still go to university, they can still go to college, they can still get the best degrees, but they do it with that understanding that they're still reaping the rewards and planting, the trees in paradise later on. They're still leveling up in terms of the paradise and Jannah, and they see it from they're detached almost, and that's why I think it's true freedom. So you can go up, you can climb the ladders in terms of careers, but at the same time you're doing it from a different position than a non-Muslim.
Yeah. And if you do it in that way, then you can never feel depressed. An exam might not go the way you wanted it to. You're not going to turn around and just sleep over it. You might not get the job that you wanted, or you might not be as rich as you dreamed. But it wouldn't affect you. You won't fall into depression. Why? Because you know what's more important. Obviously, I'm not talking about from a health perspective. I don't want to tell anyone don't go to the doctors or anything like that. I don't want to give the wrong message. But my point is, sometimes when we don't get what we want in education or in terms of job or in terms of money, we let it get to us to the extent where it affects us in every other aspect of life. But if you have a strong foundation of Islam, it won't matter.
Of course.
It doesn't matter.
Of course.
And I'll mention this. I wasn't going to mention it. Not everything went straightforward for me. When I first applied to my Cambridge college, I didn't get it.
SubhanAllah.
I didn't get it. And I only got it, I had to redo another interview for another college. And then I got it. Wow. But if I let myself be disheartened, because, oh look, this is Cambridge and I didn't get this college. And in the end I got a college that worked out better for me.
Alhamdulillah.
This is a competitive college. It worked out better. But if I let that first initial obstacle demotivate me, then I wouldn't have been able to continue. I would have just let it get to my head and feel depressed and upset. But when you have Islam, you tell yourself, okay, look, I didn't get it. Maybe I'll get the next one. If not, it wasn't meant to be. And then that's when you realize you achieve everything else that you want. You can achieve everything because you don't put those sorts of pressures on yourself.
Yes.
And that's what children need to do. Because these days there's a lot of pressure on kids. It is difficult being a Muslim in this society, especially doing hifdh with school. It is difficult with all the challenges that are around. But when you have a strong base, then whatever the difficulties that do arise, you'll have this inner strength to overcome it. And that starts off with parents in the home, instilling that into their children. Obviously, some children don't get the opportunity, but they still manage to work a strong foundation for themselves. You hear about it all the time. But that is the fundamental step. You need that strong base, and then everything else, regardless of whatever else happens in your life, you'll be fine.
Going back to specifically your hifdh journey, and when you finish the Qur'an, what you mentioned, obviously in terms of how you memorize, appears to be a very rigorous approach. And so, how was your feeling when you finished memorizing the Qur'an? Do you recall that day, that time of the day when you finished? Because you must have been like, I said, this is the last time I repeat a page for 300 times.
Yeah. So it was Surah Al-Ankabut, so it was quite a few times I was repeating. But when I finished, obviously it took me a long time to finish. It took me over 5 years. I know there's people that are doing 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It wasn't such a short process for me. It did take quite a while. So I look back, I started at such a young age, and I finally finished. So obviously I was happy, but I always knew the important part starts now, holding on to it. Yeah. But what did help, again, as I've mentioned numerous times already, was setting that strong foundation when I was learning it in the initial stage, because I read it all those times. When I finished, my teacher, my parents were already testing me, read it from there.
Not giving you a break.
Yeah, so. Because at that point, obviously, you're newly finished, and my teacher said, I need to make sure that you know it.
That's amazing. That's good. And
it goes to show that if you put in that effort in the initial stages, then everything later on falls into place. You can't revise for an exam the night before. I mean, sometimes you can. But when it comes to Hifdh, you can't just do it and learn it in
of course, it's like for example, any athlete will say this, any person who goes to a competition, whether a Qur'an competition, any sort of competition, the work, people see that maybe 10 minutes of your performance, 15, 20 minutes of your performance, 5 minutes of your performance. That's what they see. They don't see the hard work behind, in closed doors and everything. So, like you said, the work is done beforehand. You can't revise for an exam the night before. Most people can't, like you said. So all of that is compounded before, and then that moment comes.
And obviously, I know there will be people watching that maybe when they started off, they weren't able to drill it in to that standard. Yeah. If you are in that situation, it doesn't mean that all hope is lost. It just means that you pause wherever you are, whatever stage you're at, you pause. Yeah. I would say, until you take it to that standard, try not to memorize anything new. Okay. Pause, stop, go back and redo it. And obviously, if you already know it, if you're already slightly familiar with it, it shouldn't take too much time. You'll be quite quick at doing it. Thereafter, you can resume memorizing again. But I would say don't continue unless everything that you've already done is solid. If that's not the case, take a pause, go back and do it. There's no rush to finish your Hifdh. You can take 10 years. There's no rush. Whether you finish it in 1 year or 10 years, at the end of the day, you'll get to the same position. What's important is that you make sure that it's there always, because it's solid. So if you are in that position, I would say stop, redo it as if it's new. And if you're already familiar with it, it shouldn't take that much time. And a few of the tips that I mentioned before, I'll just re-emphasize them because I do think they're very important. And one that I actually forgot to mention, that I should have mentioned. People memorize at different times of the day. Some people prefer morning, some people prefer night. And obviously, again, we don't need scientific discoveries to prove what the scholars have said. But what my teacher told me, and this is proven by science, if you memorize something at night and then you do it the next morning, so I've done it at night before I sleep, I've slept, wake up, read that same thing, what you've memorized will be more solid in your mind than something when you do it in the morning first than night. So night then morning is better than doing it morning than night. The reason being is because when you're asleep,
you dream about it.
Exactly, because when you're asleep, your brain processes things. The way that when you sleep, your body, obviously I'm no expert, but
no, but it's your mind's like your whole body, because sleep is a time of repair for your body. So your mind is in a relaxed state, and it's the last thing it's taken in is, like you said, your recitation. So
if it's the last thing that you've taken in, which is the page that you've memorized, and the first thing that you do when you wake up is that exact same page that I memorized last night, that will stay in your head longer. And this is proved by science. Obviously, we don't need science, but I know sometimes people look for scientific reasoning for everything.
If it's there, it's a bonus.
Yeah. So definitely, if you're trying to memorize, do it at night. Obviously, at night you are tired. It does take a bit more effort to put it into your head. But what you need to remember is at night, it doesn't need to be 100% inside. You just need to make sure you're really familiar with it. And once you're familiar with it, when you wake up in the morning, you'll see it's flowing inside you like water. My teacher used to say it used to be like a tap. When you open it, it just keeps going. And when you read something at night and then you do it in the morning, that's the standard way to which.
So when you're memorizing, this is memorization you're talking about.
This is memorization.
So let's say you're just about to go to bed and you're memorizing. You're trying to memorize this new page. What would you do?
So before you sleep,
Yeah.
you need to look at that page.
Okay.
I would say at least half an hour, if you can. If you can give half an hour, ideally an hour. But obviously people have different.
Would you give an hour normally?
Yeah, I would give an hour, or maybe a little bit more, depending on how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And you'd read it however it suits you. So sometimes people read the whole page. You can split it into chunks. Sometimes it would really help splitting it into thirds, halves before I slept, and then in the morning going through it verse by verse.
Okay.
Because at night the idea wasn't I need to memorize it now. At night it was I need to become really familiar with it, and I need to be used to reciting it, so that when I wake up in the morning and go through it verse by verse or line by line, it's quick.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the structure at night.
Yeah, yeah. And the next tip, which I mentioned before, is you need to revise what you've done the previous few days, at least at minimum 7-10 days. I would say one juz. Go back one juz a day. That's only 20 minutes of your time, maybe 30 minutes if you read a little bit slower.
Yeah, 30 minutes is probably the average.
30 minutes. Yeah. But that 30 minutes is going to save you hours later on. Because I know some people say you can just do 7 days. Once you've read something for a month consecutively, you won't forget it. That is engraved into your long-term memory. It's no longer in your short-term memory. Something which you've read for 7 days in a row is still midway through the transition from short-term memory to long-term memory. Whereas something which you've read for a month in a row, that is now in your long-term memory. And when something is in your long-term memory, it's harder to forget it than it is to memorize it. And obviously, if you take it a step further and go 2-3 juz, then
that's amazing. So it's harder to forget it than that process of memorizing in the first place.
Yeah, because once something's in your long-term memory, it's there. That's why it's your long-term memory. So that is something that not a lot of people pay too much attention to. Their main attention goes towards learning the new part and revision. But the most recent stuff is the most easiest to forget.
Of course, yeah.
Because they're not engraved into your long-term memory yet. And you need to put it inside your long-term memory. And to do that, you need to read consecutively.
Yeah. So you'd read that before you slept. You'd dedicate an hour or so, an hour maybe plus, even more.
Yeah, but hour and a half. Definitely not more than 2. Obviously, at night you're tired. Everyone, you've been awake the whole day. You've been doing stuff. You've been out and about. You've been using your brain. You've been using your body. You'll be tired. Yeah. But you need to tell yourself, look, my intention now isn't to memorize it.
Just to get fluent.
It's to get very fluent and comfortable with this page, so that when I wake up in the morning, I can memorize it quick. And then when you wake up in the morning, you can spend an hour. You will go into your head quite quick. Yeah. And you've learnt it.
Got it. So when you wake up and you memorize that page, then you go to present it to your teacher in the evening of that day?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So whatever you're going to say to your teacher today, learn it yesterday. So today I'm going to learn what I'm going to say tomorrow. Don't learn it on the same day, because that is your short-term memory. Short-term memory is I've just learnt it now, and I've just looked at it. If you've looked at the page, you close it quickly, just read it from the top of your head. Yeah. You can get away with that, but that's not in your long-term memory. So if you're going to read something to your teacher, learn it the day before. That's the best way to go about it. Otherwise, you're fooling yourself. Yeah. You put it into your short-term memory. You think you know it. Yeah. But things in your short-term memory it's not that hard to get it there. But it goes out quicker than it came in. But long-term memory and short-term memory are two very distinct things. Yeah. So it's best to learn whatever you're going to say to your teacher at least the day before.
Are you still reading to your teacher, or?
So I don't read to him anymore.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Are you reading to any teacher at the moment, or?
Yes, I do read to another teacher.
Okay, mashallah.
So I told you, as I've mentioned, we've done Hafdh, Qalun.
MashaAllah. So you're reading to him at the moment. Is he from Bangladesh as well? He's Sheikh. MashaAllah. Yeah. He's from Saudi. Yeah. MashaAllah. How's that experience at the moment? How was it?
So just making a transfer? Experience when I first started, it was difficult. The scrutiny that you receive when you begin Surah Al-Fatiha. You can have your whole Qur'an solid, but the little mistakes, the little errors that they pick out is very, very precise, And it is quite difficult, but you get used to it, and you later on you appreciate it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was during uni. So Hafdh was before I started at Cambridge, and then the rest of it was all throughout uni, and I was still able to find the time. And it is helpful.
Yeah.
It is helpful to have somebody to go back over it again with, who puts you through a lot of scrutiny and picks out every little issue.
Yeah.
And you also learn a lot. You learn there's different ways of reciting. You learn that you only know one drop in the whole ocean. You learn that there's so much.
Yeah.
There's all these different ways just to read
Different
Hafdh.
turuq of Hafdh, yeah.
Just for Hafdh. And then Hafdh is just one.
Yeah, up 20.
And then there's so much more. And then you realize how much you don't know. And I think it's always good to try and study and learn stuff that you don't know, because it stops you from thinking, I know it all. Because sometimes you might just finish and you think, oh, I've got solid hifdh. I know my Tajweed rules. I know this riwayah perfectly. And you think, oh, well, I've done a good job.
Yeah.
But when you learn stuff that you don't know, you realize, okay, look, I don't know that much. And it stops you from becoming arrogant.
And it also improves what you already know.
Yeah.
You know, when you learn a different riwayah, I don't know if you've had the same experience.
That was one of the reasons why I started.
Yeah.
Because it keeps you attached to it. Because sometimes you think, well, I know this. I know the Qur'an well.
Yeah, yeah.
I can take a day off today. I can take a day off tomorrow. I can. Some people, they can take a day off for a few months and they'll still know it. And they come back to it. I know people that if they leave it for a year, they can come back to it and they'll know it solid. But if you're learning different riwayah, it forces you to keep the attachment, because if you want to learn it properly, then you have to regularly look at it.
Yeah.
If not, then you won't learn it.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the Qur'an, subhanAllah. You can memorize the Qur'an, you can be like, yeah, I've done it. Here you go, there's 20 other ways to learn it. Bismillah.
Yeah, and it keeps your attachment to it strong.
So it's beautiful, subhanAllah. What do you like about Qalun? Why did you pick Qalun and not the other 19 or 18 after we take Hafdh?
He picked Qalun.
He picked Qalun.
Yeah, so my teacher picked Qalun, so I just went with it. I just trusted him.
Have you completed the whole Qur'an in Qalun?
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah. And you've attended Ijazah, isn't it?
Yeah.
MashaAllah. So did you do them مع بعض, like together, the Qalun and Hafdh together?
So I done Hafdh first.
Okay, mashallah.
And then, so I finished that just before I started uni. And then Qalun was during uni.
Okay, mashallah.
So in the evening.
How long did that take?
A few months, couple months.
Okay, mashallah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between doing them together and separately?
Yeah, so obviously if you've done Hafdh and Qalun together, you'd have to recite in Hafdh first,
Yeah,
and then Qalun
and then you have
after.
to go back and recite in Qalun. And with Qalun,
Same sitting.
In the same sitting.
yeah, but with Qalun, there's already like a few ways of reading it anyway.
Like ana, for example, the word ana.
Yeah, as in, so
You can read ana in 4 ways.
yeah, so you'd have to read, so as an example, بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمُ يُوقِنُونَ, and there's and then when you get to mad, you can do 2 or 4, and then there's a few combinations. So you have to recite a few times. So it's probably more straightforward just to do it in one go.
Yeah. I don't know if I can get just an example. Like let's say you're reading to your teacher. How would you recite the beginning of Surah Al-Fatiha? Maybe the first 5 verses. How would you recite it to him?
So just
yeah.
No. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وهل أتاك حديث موسى.
Okay, pretty much the same. It's the same.
I thought you went. I didn't know you meant Qalun.
Yeah, I meant Qalun, yeah.
Okay, I'll read something in Qalun.
Okay, خلاص. Well, that wasn't Qalun, yeah?
No, that was Hafdh.
I was waiting for it.
I had to cut that one.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll
keep it natural. Give us some differences.
Okay, I'll read something in Qalun.
Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن المتقين في مقام أمين في جنات وعيون يلبسون من سندس واستبرق متقابلين كذلك وزوجناهم بحور عين يدعون فيها بكل فاكهة آمنين لا يذوقون فيها الموت إلا الموتة الأولى ووقاهم عذاب الجحيم فضلا من ربك ذلك هو الفوز العظيم فإنما يسرناه بلسانك لعلهم يتذكرون فارتقب إنهم مرتقبون.
ما شاء الله. Few differences there, mashallah, definitely. For those who obviously don't know that surah Al-Dukhan, can you give us, from what I know off the top of my head, in terms of what the difference of Qalun, Surah Al-Ma'un?
Okay. So with Surah Al-Ma'un, there's only one difference. Instead of أرأيت الذي.
Okay.
So an example would be in وامرأته حمالة الحطب.
Instead of
So with the last few surahs, there's not many differences. موصدة, there's not much.
What would you say the most differences occur?
The most of the differences comes in things like mad and sila. So it's just 2 and 4.
2 and 4.
Yeah, 2 and 4. So I could give an example. I can give a better example.
Bismillah, go for it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, because
You need some water.
oh yeah, there's water right there, inshallah.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine. Go for it. You know what it is? A lot of people aren't aware at all of what riwayat are, and the fact that this is a way that Prophet ﷺ would recite to Jibreel in the 7 ahruf. So, and it increases the beauty and depth of the Qur'an. So it's good for people to hear these examples, especially ones that they can relate to.
Okay, I'll read something now. So
Bismillah. Yeah, go for it.
I'll read from Surah Baqarah. Surah Baqarah, the beginning.
Yeah, that's probably a lot of people know that.
Okay, I'll read. There's a few different ways of reading it. So
Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون.
That's amazing, mashallah.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways of reading it.
Yeah. Is that Mim al-Sila?
Mim Sila. And with mad 2 and 4. So the first way you do is 2, then iskan. 2, silah. 4, iskan, 4, silah.
Amazing. MashaAllah. What are you going to learn next in terms of?
So you started with Warsh.
Warsh.
Yeah, you need a strong chest for that.
Long breath for that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's the other student of Nafi'.
Yeah. So Qalun and Warsh are both from Nafi'.
Yeah, both students from Nafi', subhanAllah.
So there's not that many differences. There are differences between Qalun and Warsh, but in terms of when you've got different words that change, they're mostly the same.
Yeah.
So it does make it a little bit easier.
Warsh you have to do by itself a lot of the time because of how
Yeah, I think
it takes a long time.
I think it's easier to understand Qalun. I mean, it's easier to understand Warsh, but especially if you've done Qalun, Warsh.
Yeah.
The only challenge I think with Warsh is the long breaths.
Yeah.
And sometimes people struggle with taqleel.
Have you done any Warsh for?
Yeah.
Recite for us the verse in Surah Al-Fatiha.
I'll read the end of Surah Baqarah.
The end, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين.
That's beautiful, subhanAllah.
You need a long breath. A bit out of breath today.
30 minutes to Maghrib, inshallah. فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء. That's beautiful, subhanAllah. Inshallah, obviously, because we've got 30 minutes to Maghrib, I'd love to just delve more and more into like the whole journey with the Ijazah and stuff like that. But we've got a quick fire round, inshallah, which tends to be a bit of a long fire round, so we've only got half an hour, so inshallah ta'ala. What would you say is your favourite ayah currently?
I think my favourite ayah has always been واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة وقل رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. I think it's always been my favourite verse. Probably always will be my favourite verse.
Allah, okay. Can you translate it for those who...
So it's you asking Allah to have that mercy on your parents, that the way they brought you up, for the way they brought you up. So, I mean, it's important to all of us to make sure that we make that dua. And it's something that I never forget. I think every single day I remember it.
SubhanAllah. Favourite reciter?
Okay, so there's a few options. I'll just stick to the safe option for me, Shuraim. I'll stick to the safe option. He was always the reciter that I used to listen to growing up.
Okay, mashallah.
So if I had to pick one, it would be him. just because I grew up listening to him. You know, when you had those toy laptops and you press the button and it plays Surah Al-Fatiha and it'll be Shuraim.
I can tell you've got that influence. Like you said, even back in NTS when we used to go to sixth form, sometimes I thought today, sometimes thought.
Yeah, Shuraim has always been. Yeah, it was just I had the laptop that played his recitation, so that's where it started.
Favorite surah?
Surah Shu'ara.
Surah Al-Shu'ara.
Yeah.
I remember you started that in Jumu'ah once.
Yeah, I think it's. To be honest, I don't have a favorite surah. I gave a quick answer.
Yeah.
I don't really have a favorite surah. They're all quite the same. I feel like Surah Shu'ara is just a nice one though.
Yeah.
There's loads of the same verse. Yeah.
A lot of people don't like a surah because of the mutashabihat.
Yeah, and I think I prefer it. I'd rather recite Surah Shu'ara than.
Yes, it's one of the surahs you can't go into autopilot necessarily because of that. Like, you know, the mutashabihats and the different prophets, subhanAllah. Favorite riwayah?
At the moment, probably Warsh, because there's a lot. The mudud are quite long. So when you listen to a nice reciter reading in Warsh, they do a lot of, when it comes to the length of things, they do a lot of style.
Yeah, you
so it sounds quite nice.
That's true. This is a new question actually. We haven't ever asked it before, but someone sent in as an option or as a question to ask. So it was a really beautiful question. Favorite name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and why?
This is interesting. If I had to pick one off the top of my head, maybe Ar-Razzaq.
Ar-Razzaq.
Because sometimes
which means
Allah is always giving.
Yeah, it's the provider.
The provider, yeah. And I think the reason for that is sometimes we get really stressed. I need to do well in my education. I need to earn this much money. Sometimes we just need to take a step back and relax. If you're gonna do well in your exam, you'll do well in your exam. You put in your effort. You can't do anything more than that. You've applied to whatever places you've applied to. You can't go further than that. You just have to place the rest of the trust in Allah. Because if you're gonna get it, you're gonna get it regardless.
Yeah. Someone also sent in the question. People like this question. Most difficult surah.
This is a hard one.
That means none of them are difficult.
Well, when I was doing my hifdh, I think I mentioned this.
Yeah.
My teacher told me, if you find one surah hard, you find them all hard. I don't think there's any that are particularly.
Yeah.
Which one did you have to do the most repetitions for?
That's you're talking about with the one that I done the most. Maybe Surah Qasas or Ankabut. I think partly as well because they were my final ones that I was memorizing. I just had extra motivation read them. But I think they did require the most repetitions as well. But after completing hifdh, I don't think I ever faced that situation where
because of that solid approach you took.
Yeah.
Favorite hadith?
Since we're on the hifdh status podcast, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. I think it's important if
translation.
The best of you are those who learn the Quran and then teach it.
No, sorry. You know how many times people said, "Please translate."
Yeah, no. Sometimes I forget the English after the Arabic. Obviously, learning the Quran is a big thing. Teaching it is more. Yeah. Because for every verse that your student reads, you get reward for that too. Yeah. And I think about your parents, it goes back to them because had they not encouraged you, had your teacher not had our teachers not encouraged us, we wouldn't be able to teach it. So I think it's probably one of the easiest ways and best ways, most effective ways of spreading the influence out and bringing that reward back to them and yourself, of course.
Amazing gift.
Yeah.
You could say teaching the Quran is like an amazing gift for your parents almost.
Yeah. And I didn't mention this. I thought it slipped my mind. A lot of people ask me, this is a question I get a lot. What were your parents more happy about? When you go into Cambridge or when you finished your hifdh?
That's a good question.
That's the easiest answer. The answer is simple. It was always hifdh. Of course they were happy for getting into Cambridge. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it doesn't even compare. It's not even worth 1% of doing your hifdh. And that's why I remind people, sometimes a lot of parents relegate the value of Islamic studies. They value the importance of Islamic studies. Again, why? Because we're grown up in this society. Yeah. And I don't want to make this too long now. But we grew up in this society where we don't value the Islamic
achievements.
Yeah. We value achievements in secular studies. But they don't compare. It's always... hifdh is always going to be more valuable. It'll make your parents happier. It makes you as an individual more happy than than doing something.
It's an achievement recognized in heavens.
Exactly, and whatever degree, whatever qualification you have, other than that, it won't mean anything later on.
Okay. Favorite dua of yours?
I think I've already said it. Rabbi
No, in the ayah itself, mashallah.
Yeah, I couldn't have asked for anything better.
Allah.
I've been blessed. They might not have had the educational background or the works, but what they gave me was better than anything I could have asked for.
Subhanallah. Favorite story from the stories of the Anbiya, the prophets?
There's a lot here. Surah Al-Shu'ara.
Which one do you like? What portion? Which prophet?
Okay,
maybe.
I think one. So this is like part of the story. So Ibraheem alayhi salam. when وإذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت وإسماعيل ربنا تقبل منا. They made the dua ربنا تقبل منا. Oh Allah, accept this from us. Sometimes a lot of us think, oh, we've given this much money in charity, we've become a Hafidh, we've done this, we've built a mosque, but we forget that there's that chance that it may not have been accepted, and you have to ask for that. And that's when you forget this, that's when things like arrogance and stuff have come into play. Because you think, oh, I've done it, I'm not going to ask for it to be accepted. Well, if you're not asking for it to be accepted, then who are you trying to impress? You're not asking Allah to accept it, were you just doing it to show other people? So I think that's not really a story, but it's an important part of the story, and it's an important lesson as well.
No, it's a beautiful lesson. Favorite Sahabi?
Okay, again, picking out a favorite is difficult, but I'll share a story it's a short story.
Sure.
About one of the Sahaba. I can't recall the name. I think it was Handhallah. Yeah, radiallahu anh. And he was in a gathering with the Prophet, and during that gathering he had a lot of zeal. He had a lot of passion, and he was in tears. And then when he went back home, he said that when he was with his family, that feeling went. He was joking around, and then he said, "I'm a munafiq." And then the Prophet, he said to the Prophet, I'm a hypocrite. And the Prophet said, why? And he said, because when I was with you, I felt all of this passion, and then when I went away from you, I lost this passion. And the Prophet ﷺ turned around and said to him, it would be rare for you to always have this sort of passion. Nobody is 24/7, 7 days a week with that strong energy.
Iman increases and decreases.
It fluctuates. And I think it's a story that we can all benefit from. We don't need to beat ourselves up about having a dip sometimes. We're not built to always be at the top. Sometimes it will go up, sometimes it will go down. And I think this story is a good example of that.
No, it's human nature. I think that part of that narration was that if the iman was always high, the angels would come down to give you salam in the sharia, in the streets, to show that it's something that it's a level that's not attainable, in a sense where you can't have your iman always high. And part of, I think, sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Part of being the best Muslim is understanding that you will experience the lows and to be prepared for those lows. To come out as quick as you can. And that's the lesson that we can take from this story. We're not built to be perfect. We're not built to be perfect. It's
just
returning back to Allah and asking for tawbah, asking Allah for forgiveness.
And acceptance for the things that we've done.
And acceptance, exactly. Best live recitation you've listened to?
This is a hard one because I've heard a lot. If you're talking about recent, Qari Ahmad, when I went to Cuba,
MashaAllah,
I think his recitation was solid. It made the hairs on my arms stand. It gives you shivers. I think when you hear reciters like that, there's no word to describe it. You just wish that it went on instead of 15 minutes. If it went on all night, I could have sat there.
Where did he recite from?
He recited from Qaf. So he just recited the whole surah.
That's beautiful.
Especially يَوْمَ نَقُولُ لِجَهَنَّمَ هَلِ امْتَلَأْتَ. That part. I recorded it on my phone. Please
send it through, inshallah. We'll put it in the Telegram group chat, inshallah.
I've listened to it probably over 100 times since then. I've listened to it so many times on repeat, just listening to it. It's recitation that you can't find a word to describe it.
SubhanAllah.
It gives you a feeling, but you can't explain that feeling. You just have to have experienced it to be able to relate.
To be in the moment. If there's one sheikh you'd like to meet, who you currently know about this sheikh, but you've never met him, who would it be?
Oh, this is a tough one. Does it have to be alive?
We could do from the past as well. Yeah.
It was from the past. Okay, now I'm just making it harder for myself. How narrow it down to those who are alive.
It could be any, like a Sheikh of Qur'an, Hadith.
Okay, I'll pick Reciter. I think Sheikh Muhammad Ayub.
Sheikh Muhammad Ayub.
Yeah, just to hear his recitation live.
Allah.
Yeah, if I could hear his recitation, that would be...
His Hijazi, his melody.
It's too good. And Ali Jabir.
Ali Jabir, yeah, mashallah.
His recitation is...
Yeah. Sheikh Muhammad Ayub apparently finished the Qur'an quite late in his I was told he finished it in his late 20s. I'm going to look into that story, inshallah. That's a very inspiring...
Yeah. If it's true, then...
Amazing, subhanAllah. And I think a lot of people don't know he was an Arab.
Yeah.
Where was he from?
I'm not sure where he was from,
Burma. Yeah.
Because you can tell.
Yeah. From his features. Like, when you look at him... But from the voice, subhanAllah...
You can't. Yeah.
Allah Akbar.
Yeah, that's too good.
Favourites, going back to more of like sort of travelling and stuff, favourite country you've been to?
Oh, so I actually haven't travelled because of my parents' health. We haven't really had the chance to travel anywhere. But I don't feel like I've missed out. I've got to be here with my parents. If we couldn't, we couldn't.
Yeah.
And who knows what? Maybe in the future.
Of course. Inshallah.
Near future.
Inshallah. Be the best cuisine. Best cuisine that you tried.
Ooh. This is a hard one. Definitely not the food at uni.
What cuisine is that?
I don't know.
Cambridge
but it had no
cuisine.
spice. Yeah.
English cuisine.
It would have to be Asian, probably. I don't know. This is a tough one.
From the Asian, you've got the Chinese, you've got Indian, you've got the South Asian, Indian, Bengali, Pakistani.
Bengali.
You said that. Bengali. That's obvious.
This is a tough one.
Okay, what do you like the best? Is it the pakora? Is it the samosa? Is it the...
No, it would have to be from the curries.
The curries,
I don't know if I should say this publicly. I don't know if you've ever heard of what Hudh rice.
Oh my... No, it's not fish, is it?
I mean, it's nice when you have it.
Wow, really, yeah?
No,
you know what it is?
I don't know.
It's a smell when it's been cooked.
What is it?
I don't know if is it the dried fish in those packets?
Yeah.
They're tiny little... I don't know if you've seen it in supermarkets. Really small fish and they're dried up. I don't know how they make the curry.
I wouldn't know how to describe it. Hudh is a little bit different, but obviously I don't know if it's my favourite cuisine, but I just have to say that for all the Bengali viewers that are watching this.
Okay. Do you know how it's made?
Yeah, my dad's.
Just call him in. Handhallah. Khalas, inshallah. We'll wrap it up today, inshallah. We've got like 15 minutes to Maghrib or so. Inshallah. But once again, Jazakumullah khair for accepting the invite. For me, I didn't know pretty much nothing about your Qur'an journey, so it was really, really interesting, subhanAllah. So interesting and inspiring, subhanAllah, about your journey and how, mashallah, you memorize the Qur'an and how solid it is. Allahumma barik. It's very inspiring. And I'm sure all of you can say the same thing with that regard. But inshallah, just to obviously wrap up the podcast, just perhaps some summarizing of the points for those who are on the journey to memorize the Qur'an. Sometimes they go into these really low points and they feel very overwhelmed, and they look at the Qur'an and they're maybe like a few pages in and they've got like 600 pages to go. What do you say to those people who are feeling overwhelmed by memorizing the Qur'an?
First thing is that there's no rush, there's no race. You can take your time. And sometimes someone said to me yesterday, if I had started 5 lines a day 5 years ago, I would have been finished by now. So you don't need to put that pressure on yourself. I need to do 1 page, 2 pages a day. Whatever you do, even if it's a small amount, a few lines, make sure it's solid. Always revise. Try and go back the past 2-3 weeks and recite what you've learned consecutively.
Yeah,
that's a big tip. That is one. I think that was one of the main reasons why I was able to have a comfortable revision process, because I used to read what I've learned the past few months every single day. Obviously, again, read at night and the morning. You don't need to decide. Some people spend ages deciding morning or night. Do both. And if you do both, then night first, then morning. It will be more useful for you. At the end of the day, everyone will have ups and downs. You might have a low point, but it will pass. If I stopped reading something when I got to the number 250 or 300 because it wasn't in my head, then I wouldn't have finished it. But I just told myself, you know what? If I keep going, eventually it will come into your head. Eventually it will. Whether it might take you a long time, but it will come into your head. So you shouldn't be disheartened. Some people read it 20 times and then they think, well, I can't do it, and I give up. I've never been able to read something 20 times and memorize it.
SubhanAllah.
It took me a few hundred to be able to get it. So never feel disheartened. There's always, it will always eventually come.
Yeah.
If you put in that effort, you will get it.
Yeah. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. One thing we didn't do with you, which we done with other guests, we kind of did. We asked for a few recitations, but we're gonna ask for your best, like whatever, like your best sort of passage in the Quran, your favorite that you like reciting.
I think.
Just give us a lengthy recitation, 5 minutes plus, inshallah.
Okay, you pick. We just drink some water.
Let's go for it. It's fine, inshallah.
I have a question.
Carl, then you pick party.
Can you just like tell us the structure of your day, and like so from when you wake up, what you do at the start, where you fit your revision.
Oh, do you mean now?
Yeah, now even like include all the uni stuff as well, because I'm sure people are hearing this like, yo.
Yeah, how does it?
Because uni, you're going to Cambridge, you're writing what 30.
These long
pages a
essays.
week. No. So how is it that you're staying on top of the uni work, which is a lot of work, and I'm sure you're being successful with that as well, and maintaining the Qur'an? Like, it still doesn't make sense to me. Like, so just talk us through the day, your average day, and tell us how, from when you wake up, exactly what you do till when you sleep, where you fit the revision, where you fit memorization, and where you fit all your normal, like, other stuff.
Okay. So my daily routine, my day starts quite early. I say it's best to start your day at Fajr. Whether the earlier Fajr is, the earlier your day starts. The later it is, the later your day can start. So right now, an average day, I'd wake up around 4.
Okay.
You pray Fajr, and then you revise your daily amount. So after you finished, obviously it's up to you. I'd give myself around 2 hours, 2.5 hours in the morning. And then I'd take a few. So I do teach a few students. So I would take their tests over the phone after.
In the morning.
Yeah. So this is in the morning. So I tell them if I'm going to teach you have to wake up in the morning, and I told their parents you just have to wake up early, otherwise I won't be able to take it. So my day starts around 4. Fajr, revise your daily portion, however much it is. That's up to you.
Yeah.
And then
What's yours at currently? If you don't mind me asking.
I feel like you should at least finish one cycle a week. Anything less.
So 4.5 juz a day.
Yeah, it's up to you how you split it.
Yeah.
Some days you might think, okay, I'm gonna do a bit extra today. I can get away with a couple tomorrow. Ideally, you try and keep it consistent daily, but once a week. Anything longer than once a week after you're finished, especially after you've finished and you've had a few years of experience, I think it's too little. That's what I was told by all of my teachers. They told me anything that takes you longer than a week is too little, and this applies to everyone. So if you've only memorized 5 juz, try and revise all 5 weekly, because when you read something weekly, it will stay in your head. When you start giving long breaks, long gaps, it will leave. So definitely try and finish weekly every single week, whether it's Ramadan, whether you have exams, whether you don't have exams.
So finish your whole.
What you know.
Your whole memorization weekly.
Yeah. And split it how you want on a day-to-day basis.
You know, one page, finish that weekly. Or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you know 1 juz, finish that 1 juz weekly, once weekly.
Yeah.
That's the minimum.
Yeah.
And then I'd finish around 7:30, then have breakfast, and then my day starts. So I'd get my work done. So most of the day would probably be spent in the library. But if you start early, you finish early. So I put my head down. I don't really do anything else. Get all the work, and by the afternoon I'm done.
SubhanAllah.
By afternoon or late afternoon, I'm finished. So a bit before Asr, probably.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I've got the rest of the day to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
You can relax. If you start early,
so you've got like 6 hours where you just put your head down.
yeah.
Smash out.
You don't. At the end of the day, you don't need 20 hours a day of studying to do well in exams.
Yeah.
That's just going to burn you out, and you're not going to do well. I know this isn't advice for Hifdh, this is advice for something else. But I think
but it's all,
for the viewers, because most of us have to face both at the same time, you don't need hours and hours a day to do exams. If you put 1 good hour in, it's more useful for you than 5 hours of
in between
ineffective revision. Yeah. You can spend, and I'll be honest, I don't like spending a lot of hours studying for uni. No, who does at the end of the day? You want to be efficient. So if you put your head down and find whatever works for you, again, I can't give tips for this. This depends on what subject you do, how you are as a person. You find the most efficient way for you, and keep it to 5-6 hours at maximum. You don't need more than that unless it's like an exams period.
Yeah.
More than that is just going to burn you out. You don't need it to do well, especially for the viewers who are watching who are at GCSE level. GCSE level, you really don't need that much. That to the extent where you burn yourself out.
Yeah.
Keep it calm.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, your health is more important.
Yeah.
And but so by that time, by Asr, I'd be done, latest, and then I've got the rest of the day and the night to do whatever I want.
Mashallah.
So, like, what it seems probably to us and the viewer is that you only do like your work, your uni work, and Qur'an. You don't do nothing else.
No. So obviously,
So what sort of leisure activities?
Do you eat at all?
of course, especially living out alone, sometimes you have to cook yourself. So again, if I
Did I say why?
I mean, I definitely wouldn't be cooking with Kishira at Cambridge. But
Have the whole Cambridge evacuate?
no, but if I have things to do, I'd get it done in the morning before I start the uni work. I probably should have mentioned that. So if I have cooking, or if I have to sort anything out, or even just calling my parents, you do that in the morning. Get all of that stuff out the way, and then you do your work. And then obviously I spend more time relaxing probably than I do start studying.
As in, just make it clear though, you might be an exception, but you're getting your stuff done basically.
You just have to find your way to get it done, and you have to prioritize your health more. Don't lose sleep when you don't need to. With everything, with hifdh, with studies, you just have to find what works for you and put your health first.
Do you do any like sort of sports, extracurricular stuff, or is it?
Right now I don't want to talk about sport.
You don't want to talk about sport?
Because I'm a United fan.
Oh, and you what? Do you just lose a match? I've seen some sort of commotion going on.
We haven't had a good season for the past few seasons, so I try not to speak about sport.
Okay. Did you quit your football career? Is that way?
I mean, I don't have a football career to start with. Maybe if I had a better knee.
What happened to the knee?
I mean, it's the standard excuse. But you can do sports. You can just hang around with your friends. You can go out somewhere to eat. I mean, there's a lot you can do. It's entirely up to you. When it comes to your free time, you've got those few hours. You do whatever you want. You can go and sleep a little bit more if you want.
Yeah. What time do you sleep then? Because if you're waking up at 4, you better be sleeping at 10 latest.
10 to 11. Okay. Sometimes, if you do get a chance, you can just take a nap in the day. If you get a chance, if not, then it's not the end of the world. But at least if you get 5-6 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep, it's enough to function. And then when you get to the weekend, you can sleep in a little bit. You wake up at Fajr, you do your revision, and then you go back to sleep on the weekends, and you can catch up on what you missed on the weekdays.
What's life like in? What's your Cambridge schedule like? So you come back to London for the weekends and then you go back?
Well,
you go back tomorrow, isn't it?
I mean, I probably shouldn't be back here. I'll probably be there doing work. I should probably actually be there. But the schedule is obviously it depends. There's some periods are more busy than others. Sometimes you'll have more classes, but you'll never have a class late at night or early in the morning. So that's when you do your hifdh, your free time in the evenings, and then during the day when you have classes, that type of stuff. That's when you get your work done.
Nice.
And one thing I'd say is definitely your hifdh. If you finished, you try and get it done in the morning. Your revision done. Because sometimes you'll get tired in the day and you'll be like, I can just revise tomorrow, I'm finished anyway. I've tried doing it in the evenings and it just didn't work. I just tell myself, you know what, you can do it tomorrow. Then I'd go another day. Then I'd go another day. Then it would come Saturday and I'm like, okay. And then I'd have to spend like 6 hours to just try and make up for the whole week.
SubhanAllah.
So get it done in the morning. Get your stuff out of the way.
Is there anyone you're like revising? Do you have like a Qur'an circle down at Cambridge? What's it like in terms of? You must have an ISOC, right?
They do have an ISOC. I don't think it's like the London ones. It's not as big. Because there's less Muslims there. I think a lot of people because Cambridge is quite big, so it has a college system.
Yeah, different
so
colleges.
There's 31 colleges. So it's to get from one college to another, it's like going from one side of London to the other.
Wow.
So there's not. I don't think it has what unis in London have.
Close knit kind of.
Yeah.
But you have Huffadh down there and stuff.
There are solid Huffadh there.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, they're solid. Their recitation, their Tajweed.
Do you get together at all, like any time of the year? And
so sometimes. So we do have a hifdh class on Tuesdays. Nice. Tuesday nights. This started recently.
MashaAllah.
Before it used to be on Saturday.
Are you leading that?
So I only led 1 week.
Okay, MashaAllah.
we just done it for 1 week. But they do have stuff going. It's obviously not like the ISOCs in London that have more opportunities.
Yeah.
But it's
what do you do in your Hifdh circles? Like, was it?
We're just testing each other.
Oh, is it like a group thing, or is it like one-on-ones that you offer?
So when I only went one time when I kind of ran the circle.
Yeah.
So I just went over a few Tajweed rules and I just tested a few.
Okay, nice, mashallah.
But it's a nice community there. It's small, but
sometimes when it's small, it's stronger. It can be stronger.
Yeah.
Khalas, that's nice, mashallah. Allah barik. May Allah bless you for coming down and giving your time up, before, subhanAllah.
For having
your precious time in London. Obviously, before inshallah we conclude, I want you inshallah to recite from your favourite verses. I think that we're supposed to do that, but we, alhamdulillah. But that was really important that you said that, because sometimes when you're caught up in a conversation, especially myself, there's someone who's watching and they wanted to ask that question that you asked, which is good. It's because having an outside perspective is needed. Sometimes you get caught up in it and you think in your own head that it's all answered.
Shall we just do the quick fire shots?
Ooh, a little test, yeah?
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
I mean, yeah.
Okay, that'd be quite.
If I badly mess up, then cut it.
There'll be no cuts. Okay, khalas. So just say an ayah, and what are you gonna say that ayah and the ayah afterwards, or?
Yeah.
Khalas, okay. وواعدنا موسى 30 ليلة.
وواعدنا موسى 30 ليلة وأتممناها ب10 فتم ميقات ربه 40 ليلة وقال موسى لأخيه هارون اخلفني في قومي وأصلح ولا تتبع سبيل المفسدين ولما جاء موسى لميقاتنا وكلمه ربه قال رب أرني أنظر إليك قال لن تراني ولكن انظر إلى الجبل فإن استقر مكانه فسوف تراني فلما تجلى ربه للجبل جعله دكا وخر موسى صعقا فلما أفاق قال سبحانك تبت إليك وأنا أول المؤمنين
واعلموا أن ما غنمتم من شيء
فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل إن كنتم آمنتم بالله وما أنزلنا على عبدنا يوم الفرقان يوم التقى الجمعان والله على كل شيء قدير
واتقوا الذي أمدكم
بما تعلمون أمدكم بأنعام وبنين وجنات وعيون إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم قالوا سواء علينا أوعظت أم لم تكن من الواعظين إن هذا إلا خلق الأولين وما نحن بمعذبين فكذبوه فأهلكناهم إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم.
We'll give the last one inshallah and then you can do such.
وقال قرينه هذا ما لدي عتيد ألقيا في جهنم كل كفار عنيد مناع للخير معتد مريب الذي جعل مع الله إلها آخر فألقياه في العذاب الشديد قال قرينه ربنا ما أطغيته ولكن كان في ضلال بعيد قال لا تختصموا لدي وقد قدمت إليكم بالوعيد ما يبدل القول لدي وما أنا بظلام للعبيد.
سورة
قاف.
ما شاء الله. اللهم بارك. ما شاء الله تبارك الرحمن. If you want, inshallah ta'ala, because obviously we've given it to the other guests before, inshallah, so it's only right we give, inshallah, to enjoy your recitation of your favourite portion of it tonight.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فكيف إذا جمعناهم ليوم لا ريب فيه ووفيت كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب.
جزاكم الله خير. With that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll wrap up episode 11 of the Hifdh podcast, inshallah. I think this episode must be close to 2 hours. Must be, or maybe just over. Allahu Akbar. 2 hours, I'm saying. 2 hours, 2:15, okay, mashallah. Khair, inshallah. With that, we'll wrap up today's episode, inshallah. Once again, jazakumullah khair for coming down, accepting the invite.
Jazakallah for having me.
And, subhanallah, and giving us an insight into your Qur'an journey. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it heavy on your scales and allow people to benefit from it for the years to come. And make it a form of sadaqah jariyah for yourself and your parents, as you mentioned. Yeah. And allow it to be something which people can listen to and implement. Some of the tips that you've shared, which will be very beneficial, inshallah. I definitely will be implementing some of the tips that you shared during this podcast, inshallah ta'ala. And with that, inshallah, we'll wrap up today's podcast. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.